Xây tương thân tình trong đạo Phật, tùy khác màu nhưng một tôn sư. Hôm nay đây cùng nhau họp mặt, quyết noi theo đường Phật giáo Hoàng Dương.
Dạ, Nam Mô A Di Đà Phật. Dạ, con là ông Minh. Con chào quý chư tôn đức tăng ni và quý Phật tử trên chương trình hôm nay. Con hôm nay có duyên sự làm việc giảng chia sẻ với quý Phật tử bằng tiếng Anh chung với sư chú Ân Tri. Chú là sa di của chùa Diệu Pháp và là sư đệ của con. Alright. Andrew, you want to start off by asking me a question this time?
Sure. Okay, so I've been looking at a lot of different Buddhist texts, and one of the main things I see is that I see the word suffering a lot. And so thinking about my life and about many lives, it's hard to be proven or to be convinced that life is suffering or there's a bad side of being alive. So can you share with me what the Buddha meant by this?
Yeah, see, a lot of time people have a misrepresentation of when the Buddha said that life is suffering. And they're saying, is he saying that in a negative tone? Like, why is the Buddha so negative? Why is he consistent on saying that life is suffering? But we have to understand that he didn't say that my life is suffering. He didn't say that your life is suffering. He's saying that everyone's life is suffering. And it's suffering because he teaches it in the Four Noble Truths. He said that everyone suffers, that there is suffering, that sufferings exist. And the suffering exists because there is a cause, which is the second noble truth, that there is a cause for suffering. And when the cause for suffering, the Buddha said, there are three reasons why we suffer. One is greed, two is anger, three is ignorance. Ignorance, greed, and anger combined together, it's the reason why we suffer. But the reason why we suffer, to go even further, is because there is a false view that there is a self. And the self is something permanent. And because there is a false notion of the self, this ego, we tend to attach to ourselves to this self. Right? But this image, this self-image, this mask, social mask that you created within your own mind is not real. Right? It's based on our own ignorance that we created this social mask. So for example, a kid were to walk into a room full of lawyers, go to school thinking like a lawyer, acting like a lawyer, talking like a lawyer, laughing like a lawyer, eating like a lawyer, doing everything like a lawyer, then the social mask of that kid or that person, that teenager, will identify itself as a lawyer. Right? If someone were to go to medical school, then eventually that person will eat like a medical student, walk like a medical student, think like a medical student, eventually walk, talk, and act like a doctor. Right? So the social mask that you create adapts with whatever you're in. And so when we have this false notion of the self and we cling on to it, claiming that it's real, that it belongs to us, then that's the reason why we suffer, because this self here does not exist. It's through our own figment of our own thinking that we created this social mask so we can adapt ourselves to whatever situation that we're in.
Right.
So if we're in this world, then we think that there has to be some form of self, some form of identity, this ego that's rooted in greed, anger, and ignorance. But the Buddha taught that there is no self. And once we realize that there is no self, we get to we release it, we let it go. And eventually, there is no more suffering. Right? So the reason why we suffer is greed, anger, and ignorance. But there is something that envelops all of those three at once. And that is attachment. Attachment is the reason why we suffer. Attachment to greed, attachment to anger, and attachment to ignorance. Those three attachments is the reason why we continue to suffer. However, the Buddha also said that there is a way to end suffering, which is the cultivation of morality, concentration of mind, and the development of wisdom. By that way, you'll get to, you head over to the fourth noble truth, which is the path toward nirvana. So yes, he did say that life is suffering, but the suffering is equal to everyone. How you perceive it, how you attach to yourself to it, is your own way of creating the suffering within your own life.
So you're trying to tell me that somebody that's born in an impoverished country, you know, didn't have a chance to do anything, is suffering as much as the guy living in the penthouse, living in luxury? Is that so?
Whoa. Yes and no. The person that's living in the penthouse, that has all the money in the world, they're in that position because of the good karma that they created in their past life or in when they were younger. They're able to experience the luxury life. Whereas a person who lives in poverty now, when they were born into poverty. And that goes back to the condition that created in their past lifetime that forces them to be reborn into a position like this. But we all suffer because of greed, anger, and ignorance.
No matter
who you are, what skin color you are, what degree you have or don't have, whether you're tall, whether you're short, whether you're fat, whether you're skinny, whether you're white, black, Asian, Mexican, whatever, whoever, we all suffer with the same way.
And so I have another question. And if you're talking about a self and no self, if people were to try to understand it in their own way without someone to guide them, then I think they would get into some sort of existential crisis, you know, because they start losing, like, who am I, you know, what am I, who am I here for? So what are some ways to guide someone where they don't just jump off the ship, you know, and just think that there's nothingness of anything? You know, how do you gradually show somebody that the layers that they have to portray themselves, as you say, socially or through work or through their society, shows that that isn't their true self, but there's something more underneath of that?
Well, we have to understand that when people say that, when the Buddha said that life is suffering, right? He's talking about there are 8 different types of suffering.
8?
Yeah. There is wanting something that you cannot have, loving someone but they go away, hating someone but they're in the same room as you. There is suffering of the 5 skandhas, which is form, sensation, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. And then there's birth, old age, sickness, and death. Right? And so those 8 is what all of us go through. No matter who you are, what, you know, like I said earlier, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, Asian, Mexican, we all go through it. And so we all suffer because of the same way. But when I'm talking to someone, I'm sharing with them about the Dharma, and I'm talking to them about that. The Buddha said that there is emptiness, and there is no self. That doesn't mean that he said we have to not worry about anything.
You're right, that's what...
All right, emptiness here is everything happens because there's laws of cause and effect. If there is a cause, there is an effect. There is an effect because there is a cause. However, if there is no cause, there is no effect. There is no effect because there is no cause. And so emptiness here is when the laws of cause and effect stand still. There is no cause, there is no effect. It's basically like a calm pool of water. Right? If I were to throw a bunch of sand in there, you would see that there would be a bunch of splashes. Right? If I throw one speck of sand, we can see a splash and we can see the ripples. But if I don't throw any sand in there or any grain of sand, then there won't be any splash, there won't be any ripple. The water will be completely still. Emptiness is that when that water is completely still. That means that you have released all sorts of attachment to greed, anger, and ignorance to the self and to all reality that it is. But in order for us to get to that point, there has to be that practice of meditation, of observing the phenomenon that's going on within the framework of our own body, but most importantly, we have to observe everything that's going on within the framework of our own mind. And we see that once we understand the sensation and everything that arises within the physical body and within the mind, we don't react to it, but we rather respond to it.
Right.
And when we respond to it, if we respond positively, then eventually all of our thoughts, all of our speeches, and all of our actions will be positive. Right? And therefore, I always share with everyone that don't view it as emptiness, but view it as you haven't gotten the wisdom to understand it yet. And you have to put in the practice of doing the right thing, avoiding evil, and purifying the mind in order for you to understand emptiness. But unfortunately, the time has run out for the commercial break. And so let's take a short commercial break, and then we will continue after the break is done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
西疆吞定trong đạo Phật